traversing the strange world with Peace and Toodles.
Creator, as we approach you today, it is with great hope, with anticipation, and we are excited about the opportunity to discuss things that are the great mysteries of your world, your faith, and your universe. May you open our hearts and our minds and our eyes to all that you would have for us. Aho.
All right. Professor Michael Northrop is a professor of religion and arts, and he has been a shaman for 15 years. Professor Northrop, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for coming on today.
It's good to have you, and we appreciate you graciously showing us around your property a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's been my privilege.
Fascinating things.
This is a farm that's been in my family now for 6 generations.
6 generations, wow.
Yeah, we saw amazing. Pulling in, there was a sign for the Historical Society. Mm-hmm. You know, it said that was what's it say? One family owned this property for over 100 years.
Yes. Yeah, my grandfather was very active in the community, and there's a school near here that's named after him, Norton Elementary. That was my mother's father, and he was part of the Three Rivers School Board for about 37 years, so he was a local guy, and he was born in this house, as was my great-grandfather.
Very cool. Very cool.
So where do you want to start?
You told me over when we were messaging each other before the podcast, you told me there was a number of various forms of shamanism that you've studied and practiced. Would you mind going into detail about that?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I started with something called core shamanism. It was created by Michael Harner, who was an anthropologist. He was a person who was very concerned with studying. He originally was in South America studying the Jivaro and some of the tribes that were there, looking at the different forms of spiritual technology that they used. He came back here and he created a book called The Way of the Shaman, which in 1980 became kind of a standard way of looking at shamanism. And what he did is stripped away the cultural aspects of the shamanic practice, so that what you were left with was not cultural appropriation, but rather something that was rather more universal. Yes. So he was comparing all the different cultures that he was familiar with, and he continued to study with other individuals and anthropologists who helped him discern what was truly universal. So he put that forward, created the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, which is a very active and very important institution for shamanism. And that was where I started. I, as an academic, found it appealing that they were not trying to steal and just, as they would say, stick a feather in your hair and dance around, right?
Yeah.
You want to do something that is serious and that you're actually looking for some real foundation. Mm-hmm. The other part of the equation for me was I was still am an ordained Christian minister, and as a person who I studied in Israel. I've been studying the Bible and theology for a big part of my life, and it was always very interesting to me how Scripture came to be. There's always paintings of little angels whispering into somebody's ear, but we all know that's not how it happened. There's some clues that we get from different scriptural traditions. But what shamanism and core shamanism taught me was that there is a universal way of accessing the divine that is direct revelation. And so I was very fascinated by that. Core shamanism also is very focused on healing, and so there are many, many different things that we work with. everything from things like depossession and clearing and those kind of things, which are more what people associate with classical shamanism, to more simple kinds of healing, and some more contemporary things like soul retrieval, which are used now even in terms of things like PTSD. So that was my beginning, and I began to work through the foundation. I had opportunity to work with Michael Harner himself. I also worked with a couple of other teachers through the foundation, and then gradually, as I was introduced to different types of shamanism through the foundation, I'm just a person that doesn't like to stop. So I think I first went into weather shamanism, which was taught by somebody who was a part of the foundation. Then I moved on to I'm sorry, go ahead.
Weather shamanism, what does that entail?
Well, they call it weather dancing. It's a wonderful. It was a 7-year course, and it involves getting to know the weather and getting to work with weather.
Okay.
I mean, traditionally, it would have been a person in a tribe that was trying to help them, if they needed rain or if there was threatening weather, to try to change weather itself. The modern concept is a little different because we understand the karmic consequences. If I was sitting 500 years ago, I probably hadn't traveled more than about 50 miles from where I was born, and would have no concept of the weather that I was changing something on the other side of the world. Now that we know that it does, there's a lot more karmic consequence if we say, okay, I don't want it to rain today because I want a picnic, but then that causes some kind of
butterfly effect.
Exactly.
I was just going to say that,
Yeah. So the modern concept of weather shamanism is one in which there's a real sense of responsibility. So you're entering into the weather, and where you are trying to find ways to work with the weather, dance with the weather in a way that is going to not create negative consequences somewhere else.
And is weather shamanism, is that universal, or is there a specific culture where weather shamanism found its home?
Weather is used as it's part of shamanism in pretty much every culture.
Okay.
So as a Christian minister, one of the things I learned right away, and I know this is something that's controversial, and inevitably when I say this, I get feedback, and usually some of it's pretty strong. But for me, once I started learning about shamanism, it just kept clicking that when I go through the Gospels, everything that a shaman does, Jesus did. So
Name a few.
Well, weather.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, on the ship.
Who is this that even the weather obeys his commands?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I wonder where the storm was caused.
And
somewhere else because of
exactly. So when you're thinking about that, when you look at, I talked about depossession. Something
I was going to ask you about,
normally does it, right?
Is that, you said depossession in the context of PTSD earlier?
Well, actually, that was soul retrieval.
Soul retrieval.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is?
Oh my, that's probably a whole show. Soul retrieval is based on the concept that when we are healthy, we are in our full power. So shamanism really starts everywhere with that one theory. So if I have all the power, all the personal authority, all of the personal energy or vibration, however a person might see it, the chi, there's all different ways of understanding.
The Ruach, the Holy Spirit.
Ruach, absolutely. So when we're whole that way and everything is complete, we're healthy. So any kind of dis-ease comes when we are lacking something in our personal power. Now, there are many things that can cause us to be drained of power. Sometimes it's things we give away. Sometimes it's things like cords that we have tied to people through attachment. Sometimes they can be as simple as little evil things that people say to us as we're driving by, and they flip us off, and it sticks to us like a little dart.
We've all had
You think about it later.
We almost on a regular basis interact with, and the whole experience is like nails on a chalkboard. And then there's other people where, you know, anytime you walk away from hanging out with them, you're happy. Or some sort of like, there was some sort of exchange of positive energy.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can hold on to it too. You know, like you were saying, that affects your day somehow. It's because you carry it with you. You keep thinking about it and giving it more power than it should have.
Oh, absolutely.
Or
Both
not
the
enough
good and
power
the
to
bad.
good things.
Both
Yeah.
the good and the bad, yeah.
Yeah, and it's always the bad is a little more difficult. I had a teacher who once said, you know, that the good is Teflon and the bad is Velcro. You know, it's just kind of the way it works. Somehow people can say 100 good things and they kind of just slip off because we kind of attach sometimes to those negative things. But those things can draw power away from us. So believing that we have an energy being that exists in, through, and outside of our physical being, there's these things, these negativities that stick. They're vibrational. And so they're vibrating and they don't resonate in harmony with the rest of our being. So therefore, it's taking away our energies. So that's something that can take away energies. Of course, if you have an attachment or a possession, like a discarnate human that is wandering around and attaches, which is a common belief in shamanic peoples, a ghost, so to speak.
A demon in Christian language, perhaps?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that, and just as kind of an aside, I find that in Christian thinking, anything that Christians don't understand usually becomes a demon.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Or just generally avoided.
Yeah. So it's almost anything, you know. I have had so many times where that's been the case. And, you know, again, that's a whole thing when I do work with depossession, which is not the same as an exorcism. An exorcism commands a entity to go to hell.
By authority and militant.
Whereas a shaman, when they're working with a spirit, sees the spirit as valid as the physical client that's in front of them. So
trying to coax it out and
Exactly.
negotiate, perhaps. Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, I have a friend who's a shaman, an indigenous shaman from Puerto Rico, and she calls shamans spirit lawyers.
Okay.
So
I
How
like
do you
that.
negotiate with a spirit? Is it just coaxing, convincing? Do you offer it something? Do
Speak
you-
to its pain, perhaps?
all of those are possibilities. Absolutely.
Imagine the same way as a normal person.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Because most of my experience is that if you're dealing with somebody that is a discarnate human, they are human. They're not something from hell. They are out of place.
Yeah.
And in my mind, evil is something that's out of place. It's something that is not where it belongs to be. We have a saying that we say here, and I guess I always thought it was Michael Harner who had originally said it, and then I found out that it was not him, and nobody seems to know where it came from, but it's kind of passed around in the core shamanism community. It's the sun is a circle, the moon is a circle, the earth is a circle, and we are a circle. Mm-hmm. Everything that is alive, and everything has a place on the circle.
Yes.
And that sense of, it's animism, technically,
Yes,
if you're looking, you know. But this idea that everything is alive and everything has its place says that nothing is purely evil.
Yes.
It's just not where it's supposed to be.
I come from a background that I actually, for a good period of my late teens, early 20s, we were studying Hasidic Judaism. Mm-hmm. And Hasidic Judaism, in a lot of ways, took me away from the idea of evil. Mm-hmm. And in the sense of evil being this wicked force that's just, it exists for the sake of opposing God. Mm-hmm. And it's evil for the sake of evil for just causing evil, because evil to evil is good. And it's working benevolently against God 24/7. They're battling each other. There's the dualism, to where especially Hasidic Judaism taught, in a certain sense, everything is God, because everything has a divine spark in it, right?
Absolutely.
And evil is just, it's like curriculum that God gives us to test us, to teach us, like, rather than being seen as punishment, it's seen as tutoring, teaching,
It's a beautiful concept.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know what you would call it in like boxing or martial arts, but having like a sparring partner, that's like the purpose of the devil or evil in Judaism.
To grow from makes you stronger.
Yes.
Yeah. Like
resistance training for the soul.
And that's what Job kind of teaches us in the whole book of Job, where you have Satan not as some devil,
yes,
but an angel at
He's part of the divine council.
Yeah, absolutely, right there.
Yep.
Going freely to and from God, just like whoever else is in the heavenly council. It doesn't really mention them in Job, but it definitely, like that term, divine council, it comes up quite a few times.
Yes. Yeah.
It's such a beautiful thing when you can get past the idea that there's this whole world out to get you in the afterlife or in the other life or in the unseen. Now, that's not to say that everything's pleasant that you can't see, because there are things out of place.
Yes.
And like I said, evil's that which is out of place, in my belief. So there's a lot in this world right now that's not where it should be. And therefore, it is evil. But what is good for one person can be evil for another person, because it can be out of place for the other person. And, that's another whole wonderful topic to explore. But the idea here that, that's why the concept of demon can be really difficult. And, when you get into Jewish folklore, you talk about people like Lilith. And you get into some concepts that in Christianity had made into demonic forces.
Yep.
I think that, we get to have a chance to step back. And I hope, to me, just kind of backing up a second, a religion or a spirituality should be a living thing, and living things need to grow.
Yes.
If they don't grow, there's something wrong with them. If they don't change, there's something wrong with them. If I'm still the way I was when I was a baby, that obviously I have some kind of, I'm not in my full power. So once again, that means that I'm not healthy.
Me and my wife were just having this conversation last week. I was talking about how the best religion is good when it can help you get through this experience of like reality. When it helps you get through reality, helps you cope with reality. But I think when religion is bad is when it projects a lot onto reality, and it conflicts reality. Like, something I appreciate about paganism in a lot of ways is its focus on nature, the world around us. It was just having a relationship with nature in a certain sense, to where an emphasis, like in Christianity especially, there's this emphasis on the reason you're doing everything you're doing is to save you from the punishment or the annihilation, if you don't believe in eternal punishment that comes afterwards. And so it's not a code or a philosophy that helps you get through reality as much as it's projecting these.
It's scaring you into obedience.
Yeah, it's not just, it's like with paganism, it's like you're appreciating nature, having a reverence for nature. It's part of your everyday life. For a lot, people, nature's still a huge part of people's life today. They just don't know it. They just don't realize it, because we're very disconnected from nature in our lifestyles. But
right, and I think that paganism can become a religion that is scary too. There have been pagan faiths that have been demanded human sacrifice,
yes,
and have promoted war and horrors. So religion itself can be co-opted. Religion, religio in Latin just means to tie back, and so people want to be tied to something, and they want to be tied to community, and if you can do that in a healthy way, religion can be very healthy. And ritual is very important. In the shamanic world, the divine theater is so important. And in Christianity and in really every faith, there's that divine theater. You are setting up a stage and you're creating a play that reenacts something that helps people relive the story, the mythos of their whole faith. And then that can give meaning, and it can give anchors for getting through things. And that's where I think religion is at its best. And
communal traditions that bring us together and help us focus on good things. If the traditions in the community we're all coming together over something good, a lot of times we can all come together on things that aren't so good.
What was that belief that you were telling me about where all creation basically is a big play just put on before God?
I think you would perhaps, you certainly would know this for sure rather than me. In Hinduism, I believe, isn't it seen as the highest form of reality, is the whole universe is a god performing a drama?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it comes in many different ways. When you're, actually that happens in a lot of different faith systems. So if you go to the Aboriginal Australian peoples, in their case, it's not a play; it's a dream. One of my favorite images when I was in Kathmandu a couple of years ago, went to a place where they wake up the god Vishnu every morning. These virgin young boys go and sing the Vedas to him and wake him up and open his eyes. And it's a huge floating stone statue, floats on water. They walk out on him, dress him, wake him up, because he has to wake up and then go back to sleep to dream our reality into being.
This is the dream of a god.
So we're all the dream of a god.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's quite a beautiful image, and this idea of what is a god. I mean, all of that becomes very complex because in a sense, we have all the characteristics of gods. And people like the Buddha would say that we actually are in some ways superior, because a god has to be worshipped in order to be a god. We don't need worship. We can just be. And so that puts us in a very unique situation. But just kind of circling back around to where we were at with the healing modalities and with soul retrieval, just so we don't leave that hanging with somebody, because I know it sounds kind of funny when we say we're going to retrieve a soul, because then that implies that we can lose our soul, and again that goes back to the whole scary Christian thing, and that's really not what it's referring to.
Which scariness isn't bad. The bad thing is that it's scariness that's with inevitable doom, and there's the scariness that there's no way out of. Yeah,
fear is a natural part of life, and it's a good reaction sometimes. like we were just before you came here putting a roof on our new peace chamber, and I was trying to stand on the rafters, and as a man who's aging and who just had surgery this week, I had some legitimate fear about falling from the rafters, and my, got the, so those are good fears. Yes. And, and we should be afraid of not being and not living what we need to be in life. We've got this time we've got here. But on the other side, fear can be disempowering if fear is imposed from the outside and if it is not got a rational explanation. Yes. And so and sometimes this idea of fear of losing soul can be an irrational fear that's imposed by religion on someone. And so I just wanted to finish by saying that on that particular topic, to say that when a person faces trauma, there is a breaking, and we feel that. We feel broke. People say, "I feel broken," or I had this abuse and it really broke me, or I had this car accident and I have felt broken ever since, or I've not felt myself, or I've just feel like something's missing in my life.
Language that it's not clear what they're talking about. We all know what they're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. It's something that probably most of us have felt, and in shamanic communities that would be dealt with right away. Okay. So the belief is that when you go through a trauma, let's say that somebody comes and they're going to beat me up. I have been mugged before when I was living in Europe, and they came up behind me and hit me and gave me a kidney punch, and I went down. And the belief for the shaman would be that right at that moment, my soul gives me a gift by taking a part of me that has not gone through that trauma and setting it aside in the spirit world. And so that little piece of me gets to sit aside and not feel the trauma, so that there's a powerful piece that can come back. And in shamanic communities, anytime a trauma would happen, they'd go, okay, let's take you to the shaman and get that piece back.
Interesting.
But we don't do that. So that piece is gone. Now, when that piece is gone, that means I don't have my full power. And now the next time a trauma comes, I have less power to deal with it, which means more sets aside, and then more, and then more. And so eventually I have all these leaks in my aura, so to speak. I am now just not in my full power because part of me is somewhere else. So what the shaman does is go into the shamanic journey, which is something really important to talk about in a minute here. It's kind of the core function of a shaman. But they go into a state where their soul, their spirit, can go into the unseen world, the non-ordinary reality, and find those pieces that were set aside and coax them, encourage them, invite them back to be with the person. I had one case once where I did a soul retrieval for a guy. This was on the other side of the state. He was going after our time together. I think it was to the bank for getting a loan. And he let me know that after he had left and went to the bank and filled out the papers, they called him and said that he was not a resident at the address that he had filled out. And he had actually filled out the address of his childhood home of the soul piece that had come back while we had done the work. And so that's where his head was.
Really? Wow.
That energy had come back into him, and now he was thinking back of his childhood home rather than his current address.
Interesting.
But that's the kind of healing work that is done. So in PTSD, the idea is that is missing. And so that it's like skip on a record. So every time a person, ends up back at that trauma because that piece left, and until that piece comes back, you can't push the needle forward on life and to get things moving forward. So there's a lot of work with veterans now that where shamans are going in and doing soul retrieval work to try to bring back the piece. Because, again, it would be in that battle situation or in that trauma situation, a piece left, not out of brokenness, but as a tremendous gift to the soul, so that there's a piece that didn't have to go through that awful event, but it has to be brought back for healing to take place.
Very cool. There's a dream I had that I would like to talk to you about, because it makes me think of this. I had this dream where, I've talked about it on the show before, but there's basically, it starts with, there's this hunter-gatherer little community of people. They're hunting, they're fishing, they're casting nets into the river, catching fish. They're all living together. And there's this man who looks like a wolf, like he's a wolf man, a werewolf, dwelling among them. He looks scarred up, haggard, bloodshot eyes, yellow teeth, yellow eyes, and he looks scary. Looks like a monster. Nobody knows that though. They're just they're all dwelling together. And then it's nighttime, and you hear a baby crying, and you see the wolf man running through the woods with the baby, and he hears behind him, boom, 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 like there's somebody big chasing after him, and he brings the baby to this cauldron, and he's about to drop the baby in the cauldron, and just before he does it, it's like Conan the Barbarian type character jumps out, catches the baby, whacks him over the head with the club, and then the dream ends where he's holding the baby in one hand and the wolf by the neck in the other hand. The way I interpreted this dream took place back in 2019. The way I interpreted it most of the time after that is that represents a balanced man being strong and protective on one hand and tender and caring on the other hand. But after a while, and I hadn't thought about this dream in years, but I was working one day, and another interpretation just kind of unfolded in my brain to where I thought of it meaning the wolf, the child, and the man, they all represent me or any individual. And the child represents a piece of ourself that was innocent, perhaps more creative, the good. It represents the good from our childhood or some time long ago. And the wolf represents the pain, the anger, the bitterness that we develop just growing into life. That it's the relationship that we have with life, the bitterness that can develop from that. And the strong man, Conan, he represents the strength and the wisdom that we can gather through life in our experience here. And the strong needs to crush the bad part of ourself, and in doing so retrieve a part of ourself and protect it. The wisdom and strength that we get, we garner from growing, we need to use that to protect the child or retrieve the child per se that is trying to be annihilated by the bitterness or the monster we grow into.
Well, I think that's a good interpretation. And before I tell you what I think, I want to say that your interpretation is always right. Okay, it's your dream. So, we have our own lexicon of images in our heads. Yes. And so it's going to be what you understand that image to be, because that's, it's your image. Now, images can be more universal. As we had written back and forth, we talked a little bit about Jung, who's one of my favorite on many levels. I would call him a theologian. I would call him a shaman. We could go in many different ways. Right. But I wanted to, beyond that, say in the shamanic realms, we think of three worlds. There's the lower world, which has nothing to do with hell. It needs to be made really clear. And in our sense, this idea of the association of Hela, the goddess, the Norse goddess, with the dead was a way of, again, making the feminine very scary,
Okay.
And this was... So I just want to kind of set that aside. But the lower world for the shaman is actually a place of no harm. It is a place of power, but it's a place of animals. It's where we find power animals. It's and it's what Freud called the id, the instinct, the animal primal nature that we have. There's the upper world, which is the altruistic, pure wisdom. And then there's the middle world, which is the unseen aspect of the physical reality that you and I see, which is both positive and negative. It has good and bad in it. It's, it's like our reality that we walk through every day. When I hear a story like that, which for me is very real because I believe that dreams are a reality of their own, I see this as I agree that there's a balance issue there. I might say and suggest that you would consider perhaps that the wolf is representing that lower world, the id, the instinct.
Yes.
The child representing the upper world, the purity and the wisdom. The cauldron is actually, in my mind, it's almost always the human heart. Because it's where everything gets mixed together. It's where it gets to be made useful. I mean, meat and food is not useful until it's cooked in the cauldron. Okay. And so that is the place where everything gets mixed together. You could say it's the mind or the heart. It's the magical moment where all the essences come together. The potion gets made, right? And so the idea of trying to make that, you can look at it two ways. For me, I was almost hoping the baby got put in.
Oh, my goodness.
Because if you think about it, if the baby was in there and the wolf was in there and it all got put together, then it becomes really good. But the struggle of our human life is to keep those things apart. We're always thinking, oh, the baby's good and pure, and the animal nature's bad and evil, or at least needs to be tamed, right? So the ego, this middle world, steps in and says, I've got to keep you apart.
Interesting.
So again, I think your interpretation is the correct interpretation, but as a way of adding that layer to it, you might consider that there might be another way to understand the different symbols that are there. That's another thing I've studied extensively is dreams with shamans. One of the first things I had to do with as an exercise when I was studying shamanism and we started into dream work was people wrote down their dreams, brought them to the class that we were in, gave them to the instructor, and nobody got to see them. And then we had to journey and find the dream of the other person without them telling us. It was, you talk about scary. It was like I felt so put on the spot. Everybody got it, 100%, because there is a way of doing this. It's like Joseph in the book of Genesis, who could interpret and get Pharaoh's dreams. Right? This was it's an old technique, and because they are a reality, there's something that can be visited. So if you came to a shaman with that dream, what the shaman would do is go into the journey state, the trance state, and go visit the dream. Okay. And at that point, he or she or with you could help you re-enter the dream and interview the people. Find out. Let's find out who they are.
So the role of a shaman is you're a guide.
Absolutely.
Through a strange world. You traverse a strange world. And do you take them through the experience to attain something? There's always something to be attained or experienced. Maybe the experience is what you attain.
Wow, that's again, we keep coming into things that could be a whole show. Right now, this idea of spiritual tourism is a big deal. And I don't mean going someplace necessarily, but people who just want an experience rather than doing the work.
Yes,
Spirituality is rarely just an experience that you happen into or can take a drug to get. In shamanism proper, very, very, very few use any kind of substances.
Like a psychedelic.
Exactly. That's considered a medicine for somebody who's sick. So if you have somebody come to you who's sick, who might need to go into an altered state, that would be the case. But the shaman rarely does it.
Yeah.
That was a misunderstanding when shamans were first being studied in the 20th century. They thought that this was something that they did, but what the shamans were seeing is these Westerners were coming there and they saw that they were sick. They needed the drugs because they were missing part of themselves. One of my favorite things in terms of a diagnostic tool is shamans in some cultures will say when you come in and visit them, sing. And if you can't sing, then you're sick. Because a person in their full power has no problem just opening up their mouth and singing their soul song. If you can't do that, there's ego or something in the way.
Oh, certainly. I've been, in the past year, last year I took 4 to 6 months of singing lessons, and then I usually, at least once a week, religiously, I go somewhere to do karaoke to practice my singing. I'm actually going to do that tonight. But there's weeks where, I'll be, sick or experiencing some sort of injury or depressed. And I know that's the biggest thing I notice is, man, I haven't sang for days.
It's really important. And that, that ability to be fully you and just let it out and whatever. Sometimes when we're doing shamanic work and we dance, we'll dance our power animals and we just hoot and holler and make noise. And
it makes me think of, there's a handful of times in the Old Testament, there's this one story where King Ahab and the king of Judah and a couple other kings, they wanted to consult a prophet of Yahweh. So I think they go and they get Micaiah, and he's basically have somebody play a tune for me.
Interesting.
Somebody play a string instrument, and then he begins to prophesy. And same thing with Saul. Saul encounters a group of prophets. I believe it says they were playing the lyre or something, and then all of a sudden, Saul, he stripped naked and started prophesying, basically.
Which is a very typical, and I don't want to, it's a typical shamanic way. And that's one of the, when I said there were clues in Scripture, that's one of the big clues, is not Saul among the prophets.
I think all religions, even on a historical level, can point back to some form of shamanism in some way.
I believe it, yeah. Shamanism is not a religion in and of itself. You cannot point to shamanism around the world. Now, and this is one of the things I, as a scholar, want to make kind of a comment about. The term shaman was popularized in the 20th century as a way of putting an overall kind of a name for something. It is not a really good, accurate name because there are such things as shamans that are just truly shamans. They only occur in the in the mountainous region of Asia. They are people who are possessed by spirits voluntarily to speak from the other side, and it's a very, very specific group of people. It has been generalized into all sorts of people. Now, to me, don't have a problem using that term as a generalized term. Academics, however, would say that much of what we're talking about is not shaman. So that would be just that little group of people, And then that tends to be more religiously oriented, and it's closely related to the Vedas, and so much more like Hinduism.
Yes.
Okay. So, but in general, the kind of shamanism we're talking about is not a religion. It is a set of spiritual technologies. There are things like going into a trance state. That can happen in many different ways. It can happen through dancing. We're going to have a sun-moon dance here at Earth Harmony next June. It will be led by Jane Inman, who's a dance chief from Arizona. She was up here looking at the land. We have Sweat Lodge. It's all been coming through and blessed through Native Americans. As I said, we're not trying to appropriate anything. But in that dance, it's 3 days of fasting from food and water and dancing. And the drummers trained for 10 years to do the songs and the drums. We have a big powwow drum here, a 9-person drum. And all of that will be like Saul. It'll dance until you see God, until you hear from direct revelation. Shamanism is based on the idea that every human being was created with the language of God built into their very being. And so none of us should have to go through someone else to get the Word of God. So the Word of God can, we're not talking about the Logos Christ, okay. So, but stepping back in terms of understanding that God can directly speak to human beings, we have that in our DNA. And so the shamanic technologies are designed to help us get past where that ego block, which keeps us from hearing God, that keeps us, in going back to your dream, the strong man that tries to keep everything separate instead of letting everything boil together in the cauldron and become what it needs to become. The shamanic journey, which in my case, I use drums, and drum is one of the oldest means of doing it. In fact, when Christianity came to Northern Europe, they made the drum illegal. And I think it was just some ridiculously modern date when some of the Scandinavian countries made drums legal again. They were actually illegal because of the Sami people there that used the drum for going into trance state.
I see.
And that was, something where it was so associated with the shaman that they just didn't use drums at all.
Wow.
And it's something also why people tend to go into kind of an altered state with rock music or really fast music, and why it's being used more in Christian settings where they where emotion and where that feeling of being transported becomes more important, because the drum will do it. It's there's again, we can give you lots of science on that.
I've heard old-timey religious folks talk about new churches that they don't like, and they'll say they have a drummer. And to me, I've always been like, what about it? Any church I've been to has had a drummer.
Well, it's not that the drums are bad, and I don't want to say that. There's a couple of things that where we could go in that direction about the importance of what music does in transporting you and the association of it. So if the music sounds like other music, you will not associate it with the Christian message. That's why there's always been, going clear back to Judaism, all those beautiful chants that were marked right into the Torah, right? That's all there because it's different, because it's supposed to be different. It's holy, set apart. And what we do is conditioned response. It's Pavlov's dog, right? If we hear music that is spiritual in nature and is different, we react spiritually. If we hear music that is very much like secular and our secular life, we react with secular ideas. So as the church's music became more secular, so did the church's doctrines and their appeal. And so when the ritual begins to degrade and become more like ordinary life. The idea becomes, well, let's just make church, like every other day. And so we can everybody's comfortable. Holiness shouldn't be comfortable. The standing in the presence of the divine, whether you're in a shamanic journey or you're in a cathedral,
it's not a chill vibe.
Yeah, it should be transcendent.
Yes.
It should be different. That's what holiness is about. And so as everything became more ordinary and sound like what you heard on the radio, and for me, because I have hearing difficulties and I don't hear lyrics well to music,
they blend.
I can't tell what's Christian music and what's not Christian music anymore. And I know I sound like some old guy, so get off my lawn, right? But there is a reason that traditionally it was different and was supposed to be different, and even a little boring. You know, people say, well, church is not exciting, and I'm only going to go to a place that's exciting. There's a wonderful thing in the New Testament where Paul's preaching, and he's preaching in an upper room, and somebody's sitting in the window, and they get so bored, they fall asleep, fall out, and break their neck and die.
Then he does something that wakes
Then he raises him up, So it's like, he was literally bored to death in church. So it was different. It was supposed to be. And now the drum thing goes one step farther, because when you have a drumming, particularly if it's about 200 to 220 beats per minute, your brain will entrain with that, and you begin to go farther and farther towards the theta brain wave state. It is the U of M did a study recently, and some of my friends were invited to be part. I was invited, I just couldn't do it because I was teaching, where they compared a number of different ways of going into those states, including people who'd been meditators for years, who were really master meditators, and who had, I believe that there was some kind of psychedelic involved. I'd have to go back and read the study again.
What was the culture?
University of Michigan. I have a copy of the study.
Maybe psilocybin.
I don't remember what it was. I apologize for that. But anyway, they tested the brainwaves, and they found that the drum did it as well as any other thing. But you have to be in that place. It's between about 180 to 220 beats per minute. So it's a pretty rapid. But most of the rap, music, at least have with the offbeats, will have that kind of drum beat. So then people start going into that altered state, which makes them much more susceptible. And here's the problem for me. If you are susceptible and somebody else is telling you the message, this is not direct revelation or personal empowerment. That is somebody giving you the message. And so if I have those lyrics going in that somebody else has written and that somebody else is telling me, well, then that's giving me something where I'm put off my guard, and suddenly those messages get to sneak in.
It's like indoctrination right there through music.
Right. Now, the Christians, because I was an evangelical pastor for 13 years, and so I know exactly what evangelicals say. I said it. Yes. Here we have an example of, the devil used it, so the church is going to use it. The devil indoctrinates people with Ozzy Osbourne, rest his soul. So, we can come back and we can do it, right? I don't necessarily ascribe to that kind of philosophy, but the drum is very powerful. So for me, when I use the drum, sometimes I'll drum 45 minutes, an hour. I go into an altered state, sometimes an hour and a half. The places I go and the images I see are as real as you are sitting here. But it took years to do that. Okay. So coming back to that spiritual tourism, believe it or not, I can still track back in the conversation that far. But the idea that we should be able to just take a drug and get that and then walk away from it without putting in the years of developing, because now I have an 830-page document on my computer, single-spaced, 11-point font of all of my journeys. I can cross-reference it, I can search it. To me, that's the direct revelation that I've had. It's not revelation for other people. It's what has helped me or taught me or given me information to heal. But that was all. As I developed it now, when I see something like a black dragon, I know what it means because I've had experience over the years. Right. If I go take a drug and see a black dragon, I don't know what it means. Michael Harner famously said that, when he first took ayahuasca, he came back and was so excited, and he told the ayahuasquero, man, I saw the lizard people, and they said that they ruled the world and everything. And the ayahuasquero laughed and said, yeah, they always say that. Because, it's true. Unless you have the experience, you don't know how to interpret these things. So now there's a guy up in Canada who's got auditoriums full of people that he's teaching it, that he did ayahuasca and learned that there's lizards running the world, and so people believe it. And
trying to tell you that.
And the thing is, he probably was told that, but he had no background. I shouldn't speak to him. I don't know him. I don't know what his background is, but my assumption is that he didn't have the background to understand and interpret the message he got, because he hadn't done the work.
So, go ahead.
What does the work look like?
It is sometimes it's plotting, sometimes it is simply sitting down and saying, I'm going to discipline myself to drum, to go into a state. I'm going to find teachers in the non-ordinary world. I'm going to get power animals that I work with. My life, I don't even know how to begin to tell you. When I started, I was so bad at what I was doing, partially because I had all the Christian programming, and I had multiple sclerosis. I'd had it for 24 years, primary progressive, and was in a wheelchair a lot of the time. And I had come near dying. I had my diaphragm had become paralyzed. So a friend told me about shamanism, and it was like, okay, well, at this point, I don't have anything to lose. I'll try it. So I went to a class, started learning about it, started working with a shaman in Minnesota, and in 6 months, there was no sign of the disease left. Hasn't come back in all of these years now. So for me, I understood right away that this was something that was important. And so I started to do the work, and it meant reading, it meant studying, it meant going places. We started talking about some of the things I've studied, but I went to a teacher in Nepal. He's a 27th generation shaman. His name's Bola. He's an amazing, amazing man. He's going back to Nepal in the end of September to be with him again. Worked with 25 other shamans in Nepal. I have spent more money traveling around to study shamanism than I did on my bachelor's degree. So it's work. It's not about just saying, I think I'm going to do something this weekend, or this sounds like a fun thing to read a book about. It's about really committing and understanding that it is a way of understanding the entire universe. So everything in the universe feeds into it. And it's much like what the two of you do with your show here, is you are exploring and you're doing the work. And that's all part of the shamanic work. It's trying to find out where truth leads you.
We're traversing the strange world, as the name of our show goes. And
that's a very, very good way of understanding this, because we often say, if you and I were to go in journey and we go into the lower world, we should see exactly the same thing, because it's, it's a fixed thing. Yes. Sometimes we do, by the way. I mean, you can share journeys and it can be very powerful. But the ordinary thing is that you and I would see two different things. But it's because there is no physical image in the non-ordinary world. Yes. So our brain has to interpret non-physical into physical. And your physical experience is different than my physical experience, which means I'm going to see it different. So it's like if you and I saw the same discarnate human standing here in this room, and there have been in this particular room before, we probably would not see exactly the same thing, not because it's not the same thing, not the same person, but because your experience of those energies is going to feel different than my experience of those energies.
We're wearing different prescription lenses.
Exactly.
Is that why everybody's psychedelic experiences on like psilocybin and LSD is always different too?
I believe so, yeah. Now, and that's a good point. I wanted to point out that for many people, once you spend the years with the drum, you start having similar experiences.
Yeah, I've heard various. Sam Harris, he's a neuroscientist, and he's a big proponent of mindfulness meditation.
Right.
And he's also commented on the psychedelic experience, and he said before that it's a psychological fact that you can achieve the same psychedelic state through meditation. Which is like...
It's like psychedelics are the shortcut.
It's like there's something in your mind that, whether it be your unconscious perhaps, that you're accessing. And maybe the psychedelic is just a little... maybe a way to get there quicker. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Like I said, I think it's a medicine. Yeah. So if you were in a state where you needed to go into non-ordinary reality, let's say it was really clear from whatever guides that the shaman had that you needed to go and recover a soul piece, which sometimes happens on psychedelics. And so you take the psychedelics and you go do that under the careful guidance of the ayahuasca or the shaman or whoever would be working with you with that medicine. Then it's appropriate to go, let's go to Peru and do some ayahuasca so that I can, shortcut all this and not have to do the work and I can find my enlightenment. That is not appropriate. And I can tell you for so many reasons. First, the biggest one is that the medicine takes away your power. Once you take that medicine, you are owned by the vine or the mushroom or whatever it is that you're working with until it decides to let you go.
Interesting.
So you are not in your full power. And if our healthy self is in our full power, you are not healthy when you are controlled by a medicine. It's just not you. So that should only be a last resort, not a first resort.
Yeah.
Secondly, when you don't do the work, as I said before, you don't know how to interpret the experience you have. And if you don't have a really good shaman or ayahuasca that's helping you, not somebody who took a weekend class and puts up a shingle, but somebody who has really put in the year's work, you are going to end up not having any meaning from it anyway, and eventually you just revert to your regular old life, which is what happens to most people that do it. If you talk to most of them, say, oh yeah, I did it once, or I did LSD, or I did, oh, so how has it changed your life? Well, it was really cool. I had this, and I felt I knew God, and God spoke to me, and but what's your daily life? How's it different?
So this will be my first time actually talking about this on the show.
Oh boy!
And I think this is the time. Jonathan mentioned it last week when we were interviewing Brittany from the Modern Day Witch. But there was a period of time. Sometimes I can't organize my words right, but there was a period of time where an indigenous fellow had given me psilocybin mushrooms, a bag of them. And I'm not a huge fan of tripping. I am more into microdosing. Take a very small amount, maybe the size of like a fingernail, every 2 days or longer gap than that. And so there was a period of time where I experimented with microdosing, And in that time, this is going to connect a few dots on things I've talked about, but I started thinking about, like, I had deconstructed back in 2018 from religion, and along with writing off religion, you know, the narrative, you know, the fundamentalist religion, you know, we know who God is and we can explain it, and I became agnostic, right? And along with writing off that narrative of God, I wrote off God on a personal level, on an experiential level as well. And after this fellow had given me the mushrooms, there'd be days where, like, all I wanted to do was listen to this band. Me Without You is the name of the band. The singer, he comes from this family. His name's Aaron Wise. He comes from this family where his dad was a Jewish Christian and his mother was Muslim. And so in their music, they incorporate all these, like, multicultural ideas, and he has a lot of Sufi influence on his music. And all I wanted to do was do that, or I wanted to study some wisdom text, and this isn't like, I wasn't, like, intentionally doing this on purpose. It's something that started to, like, unravel, right? I found myself praying and thinking about God more, wanting to, like, all day. I have a lawn care business, and I'll be mowing lawns, and I'll be listening to audiobooks or podcasts where they're, you know, discussing ideas like we're doing now. And from that, I developed, in a lot of sense, the drive to start this podcast. And there's other creative aspects that, like, in that time, there'd be, like, these images that would, like, pop into my imagination, or, like, I'd see it, and then I'd kind of pause. I'd take my earphones out, because I'd usually be listening to music, and I'd be like, okay, let's just let this image I'd close my eyes, and I'd just see what story unravels, and there'd be stories that I have written down that, like, just these whole stories unraveled, and, like, ideas for creative things. And that's why I bring that up about the child that's been, because these are all aspects of myself from the past that throughout time I had repressed. Like, when I was a kid, me and my friends made movies. I'd write comic books. I had these creative ideas. When I wrote off religion, prior to writing off religion, I wanted to, I did feel called to be a pastor, and I loved studying religion like I like studying now, but I also began to repress that. You know, everything has to be, you know, I put more of an emphasis on, like, science and philosophy, and which they all have their place, obviously, and their absolute importance. But in this time, there was these repressed things that I found unraveling, and I found myself embracing it more. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as I said, sometimes we need medicine, and when we feel ourselves cut off from God, usually God, in the biggest sense, is everything, right? It's creation. And when we write off God, we're disconnecting from Source. And if you're disconnected from Source, you can't be in your full power. So the medicine that individual gave you was really appropriate for the time you were at in your life, and it opened that up. Now, the ideas weren't from the psilocybin. The ideas were from you. Yes. You had to become your full empowered self, and what that did is it broke down those walls you put up to separate yourself from the beauty of the universe.
I found myself thinking about bad things that had happened in childhood that I hadn't thought about in years. Found anger emerging that I hadn't felt in years. In a lot of ways, I felt, the way I interpreted it is that it was that there was like you were talking about, a soul that you leave behind. Or like, in my mind, I imagined it as like a child, a younger self, And to where now how I picture myself after that experience is like I'm climbing up a mountain. I'm that man climbing up a mountain, but I got a kid on my back, and we're climbing up the mountain together, and he's giving me directions. It's like God of War, the God of War, the front of that video game. He has a son on his back. To be a perfect example of what I'm talking about.
Well, that's a beautiful part of the journey. And when you are given an opportunity to have a breakthrough, whatever causes that, shamans use medicines. Many of them are involved with herbal medicines or Chinese medicine, that kind of thing, Ayurvedic medicine. So it's not, when I say I don't do the shortcuts, when the medicine's appropriate, the medicine's appropriate.
Right.
So I do not. What I was saying was that we shouldn't use it to get into the shamanic state.
Yes. And it certainly should be approached with discipline and reverence, and setting's important.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's where I think I have very close friends. I have a very close group of shamanic friends that we meet 4 times a year, and we just spend a weekend, and we hardly sleep. I mean, we sit and talk like this all day and night. Cool. I mean, we just don't break. We eat, but we talk while we eat. And, some of them are involved in using, in that case, it's a version of ayahuasca as a medicine. And so, again, it's not that I have any kind of judgment. Everything has its place on the circle, and
it would be as a shaman, it would be irresponsible to not advise caution,
Right.
So, yeah.
It needs to be done like any medicine. Things can be very healthy if you need them, and if they're taken in the appropriate dose. If you don't, it can be very harmful.
Yes.
I've known of people who've had trips that have screwed them up forever.
Yeah.
Because you can lose, again, you don't lose your soul, but it can be so traumatic that soul leaves when you start to have a bad trip. And if you don't have context and if you don't have appropriate support, there can be some really negative things that can happen. But I don't say that to scare anybody or to tell anybody not to do it. Just simply, it's been a choice that I've not made, because I do have, like the phosphenes, I see colors, I see spots, I see all the things that people talk about with LSD, I see on a drum, because I've spent the years conditioning myself. I also burn sage, and so when I start the whole conditioned response thing, I burn sage. As soon as I smell the burning sage, I start to go into the state. Then I start the drum, and when the drum speeds up to the right speed, whether I'm laying down or dancing, quite often I'll have a blindfold, or I'll have what we call an eye curtain. It's like a fringe, so that if I'm walking or dancing, I can still, see in my feet. But the world begins to go away, and then I meet my friends. I have, when I first started learning, I decided I needed to have a teacher in the non-ordinary world to teach me how to journey, because I just wasn't getting it. I just was so hung up on all those Christian things. And so I went and I met this guy. He introduced himself as Alwyn. This is in non-ordinary reality, in a trance state. And so he starts talking to me, and I get a power animal that's a lion, which was definitely not me at the time. And I said, will you teach me? And he said, if you're willing to learn and you keep coming back here. He had a list of my obstacles on the wall of his house, and I couldn't see him. But every time I'd walk in, I'd look at that list, and sometimes the words would form and I could understand. I was ready to see the next step, and he'd talk to me about it, and I'd go on a journey. Eventually he said, you need to go to Africa. You need, you got your power animals, that lion, you need to go. And so I go to Africa, and I'd never hunted. And again, that's kind of an old shamanic tradition is to hunt, and so I went and I hunted in Africa and went back the next time. Anyway,
did you hunt a lion?
I did not hunt a lion. The woman I went with did, but I wasn't going to kill a lion. I don't kill prey animals, but it's just kind of my own ethical thing. Yeah. But I found myself meeting someone who I ended up marrying, and on that trip, which all sounds like a nice coincidence, until right after the wedding, when I found out that his grandfather's name was Alwyn, and when I saw a picture of him, it was the man that I had been talking to for the last 10 years and had told me to go to Africa, and so the whole family believes the story because I've got all the details, and I had been talking to this guy for all of this time. Now, interestingly, the man was not dead. He had Alzheimer's, and Johann was his caretaker. Yeah. And so he was not there. He was in non-ordinary reality looking for somebody to intervene.
Okay, so this person that Johann showed you, you say it was his grandfather or his father?
His grandfather.
You hadn't met them in person, is what you're saying?
Wow. I had no idea. I'd never been to Africa. I didn't know any of these people. It was all in the non-ordinary reality.
And they told you to go to, okay.
I've had so many experiences like that. When you get to a point, you stop even having any. It's still filled with wonder. I mean, I still have things like that happen, and I go, wow. But I'm not really surprised anymore because at this point I see the web of the world in such an interconnected way that nothing is a mistake or an accident.
Yes.
Everything is just working out on the web, and it's all so beautifully connected. And that's what the shamanic experience does. And that's why putting in the work is so valuable, because without the work, it's just a one-off. But when you do the work, you start to put all the pieces together, and you go, man, this is just incredible. And now, when somebody's going through Alzheimer's, I now know I can go visit them in non-ordinary reality because that's where they're active. They're not in their body, they're somewhere else. Okay. And nobody taught me that. It was my experience.
In the last year and a half, so like I said, I'd have these images, these stories unfolding, but also like strong gut urges. Like when we first started, I had this gut feeling where I'd start telling Jonathan, I think we're supposed to start a podcast. I started using supposed to language like I hadn't used before. And prior to this, I had like the feeling, the urge, the gut feeling prior to when we first started. But what really got it going was I have a lawn care business, but in the wintertime, I'll get like a part-time job somewhere. And I was working at a dispensary. And this guy comes in who I looked at his
customer information.
Yes, sorry, I had to. I looked at his past involvement there. That was like his first time there. He hadn't been there before, and I'm checking out his products for him and whatnot. And he asks me, "Are you guys start the podcast?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "I think you seem like somebody who's gonna start a podcast." And I was like, "I just bought podcast equipment a week ago." And he's like, "Well, start the podcast. It's gonna be a big part of your life journey." And so that confirmed something I'd been feeling in my gut. But there's been a handful of things that I've felt, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that, and I feel crazy, especially the fact that that started happening after taking psilocybin, microdosing. And so it's at times I wonder, is this faith or spirituality rekindled, or am I going crazy? And it's good to hear that there's traditions and lifestyles built around these types of feelings and traversing them and exploring them down to what they are and where they're coming from.
And when I talk to my friends who are involved in this, one of the things we always say is, how could anybody not be? Because it is so beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's so amazing. We can get caught up in all the crap of the world, and there's a lot of it. In this room where we're sitting right now, for many years there was a group called the 16, and we had a whole, a Huna, we had 2 Wiccan high priestesses, a Catholic priest, a Lutheran minister. I'm trying to think of all the different. We had a Sufi, but we sat in a circle right where we're at right now, every other month, and we just spent a day sending light and loving each other until the 2016 election, and the group split apart. The world can, as it exists, can be incredibly beautiful, but we can also let ourselves get involved. And don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about not being involved with causes that you are concerned with. That's part of your personal power. But it can also get in the way of that spirituality and that beauty. I don't even like to call it spirituality, because that implies that there's a separation between spirit and body. Life. Yeah. And just what we experience. To me, it's all one thing. Mm-hmm. That's why, as much as I love the teachings of the Buddha, his idea that life is, basically suffering, and that, we need to overcome life, I'm like, it's just not me. I'm one, and that's what shamanism is about. It's about not just living life, but being life itself.
There's people that I love that when they die, I'll probably suffer like I'll never suffered before, but I would rather suffer, and it's all part of the experience, the love, the joy that I experience with them, and the suffering that I'm inevitably going to experience because I was attached to them. So I think there's wisdom in Buddhism in the sense of like how to detach from certain things. There are certain things that are certainly not worth suffering for, but there are things that are worth suffering for.
Yeah, and again, don't in any way mean to diminish it, because I do spend a lot of time studying it. I think it's a very valuable thing, and in the different forms of Buddhism. And when you are in, one of my favorite paintings I ever saw was I was in China, and there was a painting of Confucius and Lao Tzu holding the baby Buddha. So all 3 of them were there together, because they didn't see any conflict between the 3, even though they are very different philosophies. And that's the way, if we can begin to hold opposites together, that's the cauldron thing, right? Where we can take these things and we can put them together. The elements of a stew, a good stew, are all very different things, but they have to come together and work. And to me, that's what life should be. You get all these different wonderful things, you put them together, and as they stew together inside of us, then we become more than the sum of the parts.
Absolutely.
Well, I got a dream for you.
Okay.
Since Isaiah had one. Earlier you were talking about the lower, the animal realm. And, that's the one you called the id, right?
Right.
And then the middle, then the upper realm, the perfect realm. Well, I had a dream, and I had it about 3 times, where regardless of how I got there, I was just in this old building, and there's nothing really stuck out about the building. It's just, it looked ancient. Everything's wood, and it had no furniture, no rooms or anything, except just this one big room right in the middle, kind of like this. And where the floor would be, it came in like a little bit off the walls, but there's nothing. But there's 3 portals. And for some reason, I just had the feeling like I knew what it meant, which was these are different realities that are accessible by anybody in this house. And that was the end of the dream. Well, the second dream, I was in there again, and this time there was somebody with me there, kind of showing me around. I can't remember much of any dialogue going on, as much I was kind of like watching me get led around and like, seeing the hand gestures of things being explained. Yeah. And the third time I was there, and something was chasing us, and we were trying to like run around through the house to get away from it. And I remember saying, what's going on? I thought, like, nothing's up here. I thought it was safe here. And the other being that was there with me said, I thought so too. Wake up. And that's it. I've only had those 3 times. But then, like Isaiah is saying, I also went through a psilocybin experience. And one of the things that I got out of it, because one of those daily questions I struggle with in life is, why am I here? What's the purpose, Am I simply supposed to find this biblical salvation and that's it? Am I supposed to do something to make a difference here? Am I just supposed to spread love and make it the best experience possible for myself and those around me? And that last one kind of seems like it was the answer that was unlocked through this experience with the psilocybin, of that our souls are eternal, but our bodies aren't. And our physical experience is just kind of how we shape them for the experience later without the bodies. Like, you build a connection with people, and like my wife, we focus a lot on meditating together and just letting love fill the room, right? We do that almost every day. And it's just a way we feel like we're making our souls more attracted to each other, more loved, and it always seems like we're doing the right thing, but it wasn't until the psilocybin experience I was like, I think that's a big part of why we're here. And all the existence of the physical realm seems like it was one of those portals that I saw in the dream. What the other 2 were, I don't know, but you talking about the 3 realms, that made me kind of think of it. I was just wondering what you thought about that.
Well, it's very possible. Like I said, it's it's your dream, so you have the best idea of how to interpret it. But I would say, when we're journeying or dreaming, and journeying is considered active dreaming. I studied with a guy named Robert Moss, who wrote a book called Conscious Dreaming. He actually wrote a lot of books, many books, New York Times bestseller. But he was, for him, he kind of rebranded journey as active dreaming, doing it while you're awake. And when you're in a dream state and you are wanting to go to the upper world or lower world, you need to find an access point. And so different people have different access points. Most people going to the lower world find a hole or a portal, like in a floor like that would be fine, or through the tree roots, or a well or something. Sometimes the upper world is a staircase or something that goes up, but you still can, it's a matter of going through a portal. So finding portals that move into these other realities. And sometimes the other realities are really other realities. There are, again, I could just give you lists of experiences I've had where reality changes. The farm where we're sitting, my grandfather, when I bought the farm, we got the abstract, that goes way back, that from when the land was deeded from the U.S. government to the first people here in Michigan, and it goes all the way back, and I have it in my safe in the house. And my grandfather and I used to go over that over and over because he was so fascinated by it, and when my family bought it, who we bought it from, who built the house and everything. One day my neighbor came up from the next house. It was built by the same people, and it was his family who originally had built the house, and he said, "Go get your abstract." So I did. He said, "Wasn't it, he gave the whole list." I said, "Oh yeah, that's the way it's always been." He said, "Check your abstract." I looked at my abstract. It was completely different, and his was too. And it seemed that he and I were the only people that remembered the way reality used to be.
Mandela
We somehow
effect.
we were in an entirely different reality all of a sudden. And he was as baffled as I, and he's an old farmer. He had none of this background, right? So he was just totally mystified by it. And that's just one of the examples of the many realities that we walk through. And sometimes those portals really are they're decisive moments. And so maybe for both of you, that psilocybin experience was a portal that opened up. Now, here's another potentiality. This is another potential reality that opened up. And in this dream, I do this. What's really great is that with practice, you can visit the other reality you left. And you can visit other realities you've yet to enter into before you go into them, so that you can practice. One of the beautiful things that we do with shamanism is practice our death. And we go through our death. We try not to see, we don't pay any attention to days, times, things like that. But we'll go through the actual moving on, so that we don't end up stuck here, and we know how to move on once we die. And some friends of mine wrote a children's book called On the Day I Died. It's a beautiful book, by the way. It's available on Amazon. But it's part of this whole process is not only visiting the realities here, but revisiting realities that exist beyond here. And the idea that we, one of the things that we mentioned earlier was that, these bodies are temporary, and yet every moment lives in eternity. So every moment continues to exist. So who I was as a baby, who I am right now, who we are around this table is forever and is always accessible to anybody in the present or future. A guy named shaman named Hank Wesselman, he was a Hawaiian shaman who was very interested, and he started seeing this landmass of what's now the United States several thousand years in the future, when much of it's disappeared. And this was way back before people were talking about global warming, and he was talking about California being gone and all this stuff that he was experiencing. And he was able to talk to his descendants that were way that far into the future and learn things about how to cope with the world now as it exists.
Oh, wow. So they not only interact with past consciousnesses, but future consciousness.
Because there is non-ordinary reality is non-temporal and it's non-local. So there are no barriers. When you go into a 20-minute journey, you can experience 10 years of experience in that 20 minutes because you're outside of time.
And what's the key? Is it our brain? Is it our brain and our consciousness? Is our conscious connected to something greater and more vast?
I think that's a good explanation. I don't know that I have the answer to that.
Certainly something is being experienced that we don't understand, but it's certainly something significant.
There's a lot of theories. And for me, I think that the question is just as important as any answer, because to me, God is a question and has to be, because if God is living, answers are dead. When I give you an answer, like when I'm teaching in front of a classroom and somebody asks a question and I give an answer, end of discussion, right? The discussion dies because I have just killed it by giving an answer. The question is what's alive. So if God is alive, then God is a question, not an answer. So when I always see that God is the answer, I'm like, no. God's the question.
I like that. Well, it's in the Bible, and at least one verse supports that. It's the glory of God to conceal a matter and the glory of the king to search it out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Man, not to sound like the local druggie here, but isn't salvia supposed to... I guess one of those they say that you can take it and have a 20-minute journey where you live a whole lifetime. And some people come back and they're like sad and going through some hard times because they just lived a whole life and had a family and just watched everybody grow up, get old, die. They died, and then they're back
It's
back here.
It's on the show Rick and Morty, there's this arcade game that it's like a simulation. And you live a whole life and you get wrapped up in it. You forget you're playing the game. And then you wake up in front of a video game.
Gosh.
Yeah. There's a lot. And again, going back to Jung, Jung believed in a collective unconscious.
Yes.
That there was kind of this universal thing that we all draw from. That's why I'm a little skeptical about reincarnation. When I've had past life regressions, I experienced past lives. I can tell you, I lived a life in hypnosis because I'm also a hypnotherapist. And when I was learning, I went through a past life from a town that ended up being flooded by the Army Corps of Engineers in 1927 and doesn't exist anymore. There's no way I could have even known about it. And I even knew the company I worked for and was able to find it. So it was real, but was it me, or am I just accessing the noosphere, the collective unconscious, So when we go through these things, to me, the collective unconscious is the mind of God. My job is to help make God's experience interesting.
Yes.
I get to feed into the mind of God, and that is, to me, so cool. I'm not just some victim of life. But that also means sometimes I do live the negative experiences because that's all part of what needs to feed into that collective unconscious. So, yes, about salvia, it is a drug that, again, needs to be like most of these things. They work because they're poison. They poison in the sense that they don't help us function in a normal way.
Yes.
So you have to be very, very careful in how you use any of these things and should always be wise and have guidance.
In case anyone wondered, I've never even seen it before. So.
Well, it's something that it occurs in a garden. It's not, it's getting harder to find, and it's got to be. Yeah, anyway, well, I'm not even going to say any more about it, but I don't want to be in part of that. But yes, again, it's a medicine, just like I said before, and sometimes those are things that need to be experienced. The wise shaman or medicine person or whatever you want to call that individual is one that never tries to diagnose on their own. So we go into that altered state and we have trusted spirits or aspects of ourself, or however you look at it, that we know we can talk to get the information.
Okay.
And so that's where we would go before we'd ever say use salvia. If a spirit said, that would be really good for Jonathan, well, maybe, yeah. But what we are always understanding, and I should back up and say, for a shaman, because it's not a religion, it doesn't matter if you believe it's an aspect of your psychology or it's some external spirit. It absolutely has no bearing on it, because it works, yes. And if it works, it works. So it doesn't matter.
Shamanism's not necessarily trying to explain all of that,
No,
yeah.
It's a technology, yes. And so just like most I can use my cell phone without understanding how the whole thing works, So that is really what we're doing when we're teaching it. Now, I've got a class coming up where I teach the art of shamanism. I'll be teaching it here in September. And when I teach these things, I teach it a little different because I do teach the technology, not necessarily the healing methods, especially right in the beginning. I want people to learn how to get in touch with these personages, the animals, the teachers that are going to give them what they need, and so that they can draw from them. And again, I have no judgment. If they think it's all just in their head, well, great. Susan McKelkey, who's now, after Michael Harner's passing, she's the president of the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, and I was with her in a class, and she was teaching a beginning class, and she had a person said, what if I'm making this up? What if it's all in my head? And she said, can't you use your imagination in service of your soul? And those words just were like, oh, that is the best explanation. So even if you think that imaginal I that's going on up there is not valid, just let it go and serve your soul for a while and see where it goes.
Well, yeah, the imagination it's extremely profound. It's like, where do these ideas come from? These ideas of things to invent, things to stories to make. It's like
songs to write.
And then when the stories all like they have these archetypal patterns that we find everywhere. And people were creating them not together, but collectively separate.
Yeah, that's where Jung gets really exciting, isn't it? Yeah, it's such an amazing thing. And of course, around here, we have a great tradition because Apple Farm is a whole community of Jungian analysts, which is just 7 miles from here. So it was, founded by students of Freud, or of Jung, rather. So it's, we have a super strong tradition of Jung here in Three Rivers. By the way, PBS from out of Washington, D.C. came here in 2016. They came to the farm here first, and they did a show. It's called, in fact, if you go to pbs.org and look up Three Rivers Spirituality, you'll see their section on this being the Sedona of the Midwest, right here in this lake region, and it'll show the different places. It starts, the very first scene is in this barn where we're sitting right now.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
very cool.
And then it moves out to the medicine wheel and over to the old peace chamber, and so. Very cool. We are part of a great tradition, and so I feel like. When you talk about the synchronicities, as Jung would call them, that brought me to buy my grandfather's farm, which I never thought was going to be a possibility. He told me never to be a farmer because I've always believed everything had feelings and was alive. And one time we were out in a different farm that he owned, and I was driving the loader, and I was 12, and he had a chainsaw, and he was up on the bucket, and he was cutting off the trees, and he looked back, and I was crying, and he was like, "What is wrong with you?" You can imagine an old farmer looking at a 12-year-old boy, and he's sitting there sobbing on the tractor. And I said, "How do you know they can't feel it?" And he just kind of shook his head and said, "Just promise me you will never be a farmer." and that's kind of, so I never thought I would be here, and I never thought I would own this land. I never thought this would be part of my life. But it all has come about, I think, in part because of this location calls me. And that's another thing about shamanism. We believe in 3 types of ancestors: the ancestors of your biological ancestors, also ancestors of milk, it's called, people who are of a tradition that nurtures you. So, for example, if you're a gardener, lawn care, all gardeners and people who took care of lawns throughout all of history would be your ancestors, right? But also then the ancestors of the land. So when you're on a land, when you're caring for a land, the people who were here before also become your ancestors. And so all 3 of those groups, and I have all 3 of those groups here on this space, and I think that's what is part of my power as a shamanic practitioner in this space, because I can draw from all of that.
It's incredible. Do you have any more questions, Jonathan?
Oh, I'm sure we could go on for a long time. Man, so do you believe in the collective unconscious personally?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question in my mind that we are connected. Now, the form it takes, I have no idea, but I believe that you and I very much could have the same dream tonight, and it wouldn't be because we've possessed one another, but because we're all connected. And whether or not that's what we call God, the creator, the source, I don't know. I think the source is more than that, but I do believe that maybe the collective unconscious is the mind of God as we understand it.
So what do you practice when you say you practice death?
We actually, in a temporal sense, go to the moment that our heart stops beating, that our breathing stops, and we follow our soul as it takes the journey away from the body into the next life. And we do that in part, I said it in part so that we know what's going to happen. It's sort of like the Tibetan Book of the Dead that they are read when people are dying. And because you have to know, but really it's because if I'm going to, let's say you came to me, we hope this doesn't happen, and you're possessed with a discarnate human, and I try to tell this person perhaps hasn't crossed over because they were Christian and they've been told, about burning in hell, and there was some sin they did when they were 14 and they stole a belt buckle from a store and they think they're going to burn for eternity, and that God's going to punish them for that. And so they don't cross over. And souls can't exist, because we're all vampires, right? We have to eat living things, meat, vegetables, whatever. Yes. We have to kill to live. Yep. And souls can't do that. So they have to attach to us to stay here, because otherwise they get no life force to stay in this part of reality. So they attach to you, and you come here, and now I've got to convince you that you're not going to go to hell for stealing that belt buckle. Not you, but the you that's with you. And so one of the things you learn as a shamanic practitioner is you're naked in front of other spirits, because my body and all the stuff I do to try to, with body language, to try to fool people means nothing when you take the body away. So that soul is looking at my bare soul, and they can tell if I'm lying. And I need to be able to say, I've been there. I know what the afterlife is. It's good, and I can guide you there. And so that's the other reason we practice it.
Very cool.
So when you do an exorcism, or when people do exorcism, do you do exorcisms?
I do a depossession. Okay, so the difference in exorcism is a commanded removal, where usually commanding someone to go to hell.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, so we don't do that. That's not my place. The soul is in the hands of the Creator. I don't get to judge. And as soon as I stand in the place of the Creator and say, to hell, you demon, it's probably somebody's grandma I'm talking to who just couldn't cross over. Right. And now I'm commanding her to go to hell, and she's terrified, and the people are terrified, and the body's terrified that's going out of, and it serves no purpose. I've been very fortunate that I've been very close to some people in the Catholic Church who've worked with me, and where we've been able to avoid some of those kind of awkward circumstances. So it's a negotiation, like we said earlier, for me. I've had, it's always hard when you're dealing with clients. I don't want to, tell too much, but I've seen young children who've all of a sudden got in the face of old people and different voices. Actually, when I first started this process, one of the people who you met when you came in here is a Catholic priest that was out working. There was an active Catholic priest. And this was many years ago, it was 25 years ago maybe, and he came here to the barn because we were having full-body apparitions in here that groups of people were seeing. And so he came in here to exercise the barn, and he was the first person I ever heard not say, you have to go to hell. He actually came in here and he threw holy water on the east wall, which is just behind the two of you, and there were screams. It was just like out of a movie. And it was blood-curdling. And we both laughed because it had to be a coincidence, right? Because even though we're both people of faith, that doesn't happen. That only happens in the movies. So he took a holy water and threw it at the wall again. I was working with him because I was doing artwork for a Catholic church. And and again, the screams happened every time. And so finally he did the rest of the barn, came back, and then he came to the wall and he said, I don't know what you are, but you're not in the right place. There's a place for you, and that's place where you need to go. And so he started talking, and he prayed, but he prayed for, not against, whatever was at the wall. And it left, and it's never been back. And that was a transforming time. That was before I was introduced to shamanism. And
Okay.
this was just brand new to me. And he's continued to be my friend. You know,
Yeah.
we even built a cabin where he stays. He is a little cabin that you might have seen over there, and that's where he stays when he's here. But it has been such a wonderful experience of understanding that most things really do have a place. It's like when I was in Peru, what was the last spring? A year ago, spring, I didn't know that chocolate is only pollinated by mosquitoes.
Really?
Yeah. They actually, in the Chocolate Museum, they have a huge mosquito because they have homage to mosquitoes there. Because that's what, we wouldn't have chocolate without mosquitoes. You know, people say, what possible good use would there be for mosquitoes? It's like everything has its place, even the mosquito. And that's what's beautiful about this. When you start talking about things like depossession, there's a place for these people to go. And I have seen healings. One instance of a guy who had a crushed ankle, couldn't walk. When the spirits left him, his ankle was healed instantly, and a hernia went away that the doctor couldn't explain.
Man, I wonder if my teeth could grow back.
You know, the thing is, anything is possible. And I know we're at the end, and of course I could go on forever. I told you guys not to worry about me going short. But so I just would say, you know, I love sharing this kind of thing, and I love sharing it with people beyond this space, because it's not about anything anybody owns. It's about trying to get the world to wake up to say, if we could stop being so binary in our thinking about, you know, it's either this or that, and just start to say everything has a place on the circle. And maybe my place is not next to your place on the circle, but you do have a place on the circle. You know, you have a right to be here, and you have a right to your feelings and your
recognizing their humanity.
Yeah, in that
not seeing them necessarily as the other.
And not even just that, but when you get past that, because shamanism is animistic, everything in this space is alive. Mm-hmm. That's why this barn, which was built in 1869, where we're sitting, she has a name, and I talk to her, you know. Everybody talks to their car sometimes. You know, we instinctively know everything has some aspect of life. It doesn't have the same volition that we have as sentient creatures, but it is alive in a very special way. Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's excellent. I think that's a really important, you know, relationship to have. When I create art, almost all the paintings here in this space I made, and I talk to them. They're all alive, you know. They were my babies, but I create them and let them go, and they make their own existence and hopefully go off in the world.
That's so interesting. Creation that just kind of unravels. You're simply the tool that creation itself is using. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that somebody else sees things that way, because every single time I ride my motorcycle, pull it over, turn it off, put a hand on it, like, thank you, good job.
Excellent.
Like, every time.
That's a healthy relationship, I think.
I've never told anybody that either until now.
Well, that's excellent. Very good.
All right.
I really appreciate the opportunity.
We are very grateful for you coming on today, and for you giving us your time and your knowledge and experience. So
every time we finish another interview, for the last 5 of them, this one's my favorite. And the next one, this one's my new favorite.
This is definitely my favorite. So
Mine too.
Yes.
Mine too.
Well, it's that's where life should be. It's always a new door opening and something new and amazing that's going to be around the corner. Mm-hmm. And so this becomes a portal to the next experience. And and maybe we can do this again. I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah,
we
would absolutely love that. Yeah.
So if you would want anybody to contact you,
yes,
where can they do that?
That's what I was about to ask.
The website is earthharmonyhealingcenter.com. Just so all one word, earthharmonyhealingcenter.com. That has our calendar and contact information. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me and with to find out what we're doing here at Earth Harmony, which is the family farm and our peace chamber and our dance arbor and all the things that we're doing here. So, the classes that I teach are listed on there. We have a drum making class coming up. Because if you have relation with your own drum, that's even a better way to drum. Okay. And so we'll be making some elk drums towards the end of August. In September, we start we'll do a weekend Art of the Shamanic Journey class. Then I'm going to be starting a weekly class. I had one that met for 7 years, and everybody kind of aged out, and we'll be starting again. So all of those things, if you watch on the website, you can see.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. I'm going to say what I say at the end of every episode.
Like and subscribe.
No, we're supposed to say that at the beginning for the people who don't finish every episode.
Yes.
To where they're not going to finish the whole episode, they can at least like and subscribe. But, all right, folks, let's keep traversing this strange world with inquisitiveness and
curiosity.
And a little bit of swag, too.
And swag, sure.
Yeah. And let's remember to be neighborly to folks, because at the end of the day, we're all just strangers in a strange land.
Indubitably.
Yes, sir. All right. Until next time, peace.
Toodles.
Thank you so much.
If you would like to contact us, email us at peaceandtoodles@gmail.com. Until next time, salutations, my fellow strangers.
What will they think of next?